We got a pretty good squall of snow for a couple hours. It was whiteout conditions, and this is what we got now. Good old Vermont. You never know what's coming tomorrow. Hello YouTube. So today I want to talk about what Einstein said about anyone can make something more complicated. It's true genius that makes something work and be simple. And I think that goes along with the purist ideas. It's really not so much being a purist, it's really knowing what you have and being able to take care of it. Understanding it as to where nowadays, whether it's, motorcycles or government, it seems like nobody knows what the hell's, I guess I can't say that's as much for motorcycles because plenty of people know what the hell makes them tick, and probably the same is true with government. But it seems like it's so big and complicated, like not being able to check the fluids in your car on a lot of these newer vehicles. It takes a machine to do it, a special hookup or whatever. I think that's where the purist theory comes in a lot. Is, we like things old school because it was a lot easier to understand. Tuning your own carburetor. That thing is, there's plenty of old bikes out there, luckily. But as far as the new bikes go, even the throttle control systems, everything's computer. So, yeah, I think that's a lot of what we bothers us as far as, like, guys that are a little bit antiquated in their beliefs, and, it was just a little bit simpler. Even 10 years ago, both my vehicles were built in Texas, and now, Harley Davidsons are built in Korea, and, not that that's a bad thing, but it just doesn't make any sense to people here in America why, we're giving big businesses over there breaks to ship jobs out of this country, and that just goes along with that complexity that I was talking about. Certainly the people that are making money understand it, but is that going to do any good for this country? Is there any such thing as countries anymore, or is it already the New World Order that they're talking about? And, that's what it seems like, because China, they own the Chrysler Building, which is a historic United States landmark. Some parts of Korea are bad, other parts are good. Who the hell knows what's right, and I don't know. That's it, though, anyways. I think Einstein, he certainly was ahead of his time, and that certainly does simplify things for me, because I've always seen myself, too many gadgets on a bike. That's why I love my Z. Some bitch is all motor. There ain't nothing to mess with. If you go down, you can't blame it on anything. The bike definitely does what it's supposed to. And, a lot of the racers, when these electronic rider aids were coming in, like Josh Hayes for one, he didn't like to use them because, it lost that connection with the bike. And, now they can make it perfect to the rider the way he rides, and, that's the difference between a real race bike and what we get out here on the street. And, of course, the software they use is a lot better and blah, blah, blah. So, I think that's what it comes down to, though, is, losing that connection, not feeling like, it's really yours because you can't really do anything with them anymore. So, that's it right there. And of course, the same goes for the shops. You know, they've got to buy $250,000 machines to do simple diagnostics nowadays, as to where, you know, 10, 20 years ago, you bring it to a mechanic, you know, it's this, it's that, it's the other. You know, he could definitely narrow it down to within a few things. You know, there wasn't a million sensors on them and whatever. Actually, I wanted to show you my Busa too, because that's kind of a good example. Back then, in 2000, bikes weren't limited like they are nowadays. Like, if you get a badass bike, that's my Busa right there. That's another four-wheeler I had. I had it all customized to say J-Dog, and it had 13 all over it. And there's my first brand new bike, that ZX6R. Hope that's a good enough shot of them. You know, as to where now bikes like that are limited to 186, and it makes you say, what the hell's the point of that? Like, 186 is going to save your life. And I'm sure there's some political reason the companies don't want to get sued, and on and on and on. You know, once again, that complexity. I certainly don't understand it. So yeah, I guess I summed it up right here. Purists not willing to complicate what they love. You know, and that's true with motorcycles, you know, with our country, whatever it is. Bikes and expectations. We kind of talked about this once before with the, you know, not getting a bike that's over your head, but getting a bike that's over your head like that Z over there. I mean, it makes the same power with almost the same torque curve as a speed triple, and yet when I rode my friend's speed triple, you know, it feels like that bike's got, you know, 50 more horsepower, and he even agreed. You know, when you do go out and get a bike, you can't really depend solely, because I mean, that KTM 1290 is a good example. You know, when that bike first came out, all the other bikes were terrific. You know, the Aprilia, the BMW, you know, they would have walked all over the competition had it not been for that KTM coming out. And now you're hearing about clanky gears, you can't adjust the front suspension. You know, this is after a couple years, not even. So go out and, you know, try to ride your bike that you're going to get. Like I was saying the other day, you can go out and get a wicked nasty bike for a few $1,000s. I just see a Busa, an old Busa too, the good ones, that were, you know, it had like 36,000 miles. So, you know, you make sure you touch the valves, and as long as the rest of the bike's working the way it should, you shouldn't have any worries. And that's a serious bike. I mean, certainly not a beginner's bike, heavy and massive, powerful, but certainly comfortable. I mean, I'm sure guys could start out on it. So go out and, you know, certainly try to figure out what you want out of riding. I mean, if you do want that simple ride that's, you know, not intrusive and you're not going to really do it much, you know, I'd certainly say don't spend any more than you have to. You know, don't get any more bike than you needed to. And try not to bullshit yourself as far as your own skills go. I mean, a beginner rider riding a bike like this probably would be a bad idea, just because it's a lot of bike to hold up and all that good stuff. And it is a whole different riding experience. Yeah. I guess that'll pretty much do it. We covered enough. We can... I also encourage people to, you know, scout through YouTube for places like Motorcyclist, Cycle World. I think Motorcyclist is a little bit better. That Ari Henning, he seems like a pretty good boy, and he's got some experience, and you know, he lives the life. So he's going to give you tips. Same with Revzilla. They've got a pretty good channel as far as how-tos and what to expect out of bikes, and they'll show you a nice variety of bikes. Because you never know who, I mean, even they can be biased, but if you watch like the last few years or whatever, you're going to get a pretty damn good idea of what's out there. And then you can kind of read between the lines from what they were saying at the beginning to what they're saying now and how that all works. You know, I love magazines, a lot of good tips in there, and you know, I'm not a computer guy, so I love to flip the pages and go back when I get something I'm really, you know, obsessed over. Yeah, I think that's it. Making yourself learn. And, you know, when I first got a bike, I was a young kid, 9 years old, and my first bike was a CB 160, 1969. And what I thought was it was a Honda Cub that a friend of mine had, and I knew I could ride that. So, you know, I mean, he could. I never did ride his, but he was the same age and whatever. But I wound up getting that bike. I bought it for like $60 with a whole nother bike, spare parts bike, you know. It was an awesome deal. But, you know, I was with my dad, and it just happened to be, it was side the road for sale, and we grabbed it up, and I did learn on that bike. I had it for quite a long time, and an older friend of mine had a little MX-80, and he wound up trading me even. It made sense for me, for sure, because I used to ride that bike, the CB160, in the field, and it was a street bike, if you don't know what it is. And it would have so much grass and crap on the pegs because it was so low and just not designed for that, that it looked like I had a hay bale dragging out underneath my bike. And of course, if I tipped it over, I couldn't pick the son of a gun up. So that's kind of what I'm talking about as far as, you know, you can learn on stuff, and I would say, you know, that was the beginning of my experience. And it was a good one. I mean, I'll always definitely remember that bike. And, but, you know, certainly once I went to the 80s, it made a hell of a lot more sense, obviously. So yeah, that's it. Do your own little research. You know, if you're serious about biking, I put a few likes on stuff where cars took out bikers. One biker, you know, got that target fixation thing going where you look and then the bike goes there. That's real. And, you know, they died. So it's, you know, like I said, I mean, I've died doing, or almost died doing 30 in an automobile. So it's not like I'm terrified of these things, but, you know, I had a built, you know, Thunderbird. It was an 81. And had I had one of today's cars, I'm sure I would have been mincemeat, worse than I was. So I was lucky that I had all that protection around me, as to where this, you're flying through the air, you're crushed, boom, it's done. So there is a difference, and definitely take that into consideration, because if you have any doubts about it, I mean, it's a sort of thing where, like I said the other day, it's passion. You know, you can't control it. Like, if I got rid of my bikes when I was laid up a few years back and literally couldn't turn over in bed, I was most depressed I've ever been in my life. You know, it was the first time I didn't own a bike. You know, usually I've got at least one. Throughout all my years, I literally have had at least one. That's why I've accumulated as many as I have. But, you know, it's something that it's you, you know, it literally makes up half your life. I mean, you can't live without it, kind of thing. And if you don't really feel that way, you know, go out and kind of dip your toes in, and if it doesn't take, you know, good enough. Thank you. Enjoy life on two wheels. Fox, another 74 company. Ha.